Welcome, everyone, to Beyond Rise courses that change behavior, not just screens. I'm Paul Schneider, and I'm the head of product marketing at Domino. And I'm here with a great partner, Harbinger, and fellow speaker, Vikrant. Could you go ahead and introduce yourself and say hi?
This is Vikrant Nene, and I'm a learning solution specialist with Harbinger Group, and been in the e-learning domain for a little over 20 years now, and seen a lot of e-learning happening right from the flash days to the HTML to the new tools to the AI coming in big time. So great to be here and looking forward.
So, we're going to talk about a lot of different things in here, but it's really about change. It's measuring the deeper comprehension, how we can make that happen to drive that behavior change, cure that learner fatigue that we're probably all familiar with, unfortunately, different ways to reduce the operational costs because we want to do all these things without raising the time and effort and et cetera with that. And in doing it, to protect your investments if you've already invested and built, for example, a lot of courses in Articulate Rise, how you can walk away with not having to leave that behind, but take it with you, so to speak. So these are some of the topics that we'll talk about today. First off, though, who is Domino? We've been around for over 25 years. We provide the capability to really empower you to make the most out of your employees and really enable them to be agents of change within your organization. And we do that providing a system that enables you to not only create, but to manage and dynamically deliver your content through your LMS, your learning portals, all at scale. And that's all in one platform, one interface, making it very easy to go ahead and do that.
I can talk about Harbinger Group. So we have been in the business of e-learning development and software services for about a little more than 35 years. They were founded way back in 1990. And we basically partner alongside organizations totally in the people business. And we innovate and help them build products and solutions that really transform the way people work and people learn. So we are in the EdTech, HR tech space, pretty big time. A big company of about 800 harbingers. We are spread across India and the United States. We have experience with a little more than 30 learning platforms. Over these years, we have done more than 50,000 hours of content creation with 3 patents in e-learning and more than 100 plus awards. And we are basically the custom content development and product development areas with a host of offerings and solutions and services.
And one of the things I love about Harbinger is if it's happened, they've probably seen it, experienced, and done it. So great to have you here today.
Thank you, Paul.
One of the first things that we wanted to look at is why Articulate Rise doesn't always rise to the occasion, and wanted to see with you a little bit, maybe what are some of your own experiences in terms of using Articulate Rise, where you maybe had some challenges there. So we just launched the poll. It is a multi-select. Of course, if you have any other unique things, just pop them into the chat, but check on any of the different choices that you've experienced in using Articulate Rise that have been a challenge or different issues. But looks like most of our responses in, and not surprisingly, about all of those items people have experienced. Probably the biggest two are lack of engagement and interaction and failure to use feedback strategically. Good thing is we're going to be talking about those as well.
So we could probably start with the first one, right? And that's all about learner fatigue. And I think we have experienced this quite a lot in quite a few of the e-learning courses. And I would probably like to start with an example of something that we saw pretty recently. So there was this banking organization that had approached us. They have some e-learning team at their end who are creating these courses. And they showed the course to us that they have been building and a group of courses. And we immediately saw what the problem was. So the problem was that imagine a course with just a big long scroll, right? Maybe a 20-minute module with just one big scroll with no continuity. There are no logical breaks in between, no prompts to go to the next stage or to have a recap of what you have learned till now. Interactivities were just thrown in, right? Without any rhyme and rhythm. There was also just one individual menu item for the entire course. I, as a learner, would have no way of knowing where I am in the course. How much have I completed? How much am I yet to complete the course? So that was a pretty bad example. And I would not want to be that person who would have to take such a course, right? And I think that's a problem with a lot of template-based courseware like or tools like Rise, right? They just come in blocks. You go from block one to block two to block three and try to understand what's happening. And again, the problem with Rise is once you have seen one course, you have pretty much seen all the courses because all the courses look very similar to each other. The same standard blocks, the same standard interactivities, and these are actually from different courses, but you get the drift, right? As in it's like the same experience that the learner would get. And of course, there are ways to work around this. It Rise, and then a lot of other things that you can do. So basically, you got to think of what's the process that the learner would apply. So something which gives them a chance for, say, classification or to test, if it's a diagram, to test maybe spatial reasoning, or can you ask them to predict something, or is it some comparative analysis that you can throw in and all that. So a lot of things that you can do to, break the pattern and turn off the autopilot mode that many courses like Rise, many tools like Rise force the learner to do. So
I was just thinking, Grant, one of the things our customers said, you seen one Rise course, you've seen them all. And I think you can do things as an instructional designer to do a step above your first example. And Rise has some template things in there, but it's really a limited set of look and feel options and of interactivity. And so you're kind of mix and match, and it's a little bit kind of the same, maybe different order on some things. I
absolutely.
think you're going to show us a little bit about what you did to within the team's
Yeah.
capability within that. And we can see some really great designs put forth by Harbinger, but from a instructional design standpoint, when you're doing the storyboard, it almost limited what you could even think about, I'm sure.
Yeah, as in storyboarding just becomes so repetitive and there's not much that you can think about beyond certain things, right? Rise is a simple tool to use, but because it's simple, it has its limitations, severe limitations. And for Rise, probably you can still do good design and maybe one-off course could still stand out. But when you're dealing with a catalog of courses, right, the learner would just be completely at sea when they're going through the same kind of courses, big catalog of courses and all. So sometime back, we were approached by this organization which is into energy solutions, temporary energy solutions for things like conferences or big sports meets and all that. And they set up these small power plants for energy. And you can imagine that they pretty much work around the globe. So they have a lot of mobile workforce which goes on from different countries and works at different events and different locations and all. And the course that they wanted us to work on was on data privacy, right? So it was an awareness level course and everybody needed to know what is data privacy, what is personal data, what is non-personal data, what is spatial data, GDPR, etc., etc. So we designed this course for them. And naturally, this was at a knowledge comprehension level, not more than that. And we could do some good things about it, but still it was a Rise course, right? So you introduce the topic, then get into what is personal data, then the same kinds of interactivity, and then you could do something like a drag and drop for classification and all that. And sometime later, they came back to us saying that, this course was good at an awareness level for people who were affected by this. But then could we do something for people who were actually taking those decisions on what kind of data to share, what not to share, where to share, how to share, and all that? So people who would be responsible for sharing data and who would be responsible for sharing sensitive data. And when we started thinking about it, there was no way that we could do it in Rise because what such an approach demanded was something to do at maybe an analysis level, something to go a little beyond what was done. So, and since it was a mobile workforce, they wanted everything responsive. So naturally, we went to Domino as the tool of choice for creating this course. And what we basically did was take some of those simple questions and screw them up into great scenarios, and then, just level up the screens to do a little more than what a simple scenario would do. When we went into Domino, of course, it gave us a lot of flexibility and a lot of chance to maybe even work on simple screens, right? So something like the screen, say, a deployment request, a simple scenario with a knowledge check. Over here, we can start doing something different. It looks completely different. We can get in the parallax. We can get into action mode, action buttons and all that, and see the consequences of this particular scenario. Going next, we can bring on accordions of a different kind. Can get key messages after some actions have been done. So a simple drag and drop like this, right? We just gives us correct, incorrect. In case of Domino, we can actually get into a per item kind of a feedback. So it tells me what I did wrong, what I did not do wrong, and what was the reason, right? What is person data, what is special category data, and all that. So we can have a per item feedback, a simple clickable over here for confidentiality, privacy, where they overlap, can again be turned into a drag and drop so that the learners have to decide whether this information is for privacy only, this information is for confidentiality only, and all that, right? A simple knowledge check in this case, this is, sharing information on email, an email risk kind of a situation. We can get and start doing various things over here. Interesting things, we can bring in videos, we can actually ask them to see consequences of what they have done.
As you're going through this, one of the things that struck me back to the original of when you're looking at the Rise course here, first off, kudos to your team. I think it's laid out very well. They did a pretty great job within the limitations that they have here, but it's kind of the same sequence, the same 2 or 3 things, even variances within like the tabs and the colors are limited there, where I see your team really reimagined what this content could be and really focus on the content and the objectives, adding in things that accentuate what it's explaining there, the colors and the shapes. When you're showing the videos, instead of having to scroll to it section by section, you're actually displaying it right on top of it with pages and light boxes and other elements, and really changing up the layout. I mean, learning's hard.
Yeah.
No doubt about it. And learning fatigue is, we can haha this, but it is real. I mean, it's always hard to learn in itself, but making things really drive home that message and again, not be the same, but be personalized to the content.
So yeah, as in Domino, I think is a great tool in dealing just this, right? As in every course, you can think of something different. Every screen, you can think of something different. And really all the creativity that you can put in, right? Your instructional designers, your visual designers, they get a great canvas to really test it out. And it's a powerful tool. So you can do quite a lot in this.
I think when it comes to those design choices, we still get folks who their experience is limited. They've been using Rise, maybe one other tool or something like that. And they don't realize that, to create some really creative designs and something that the design, just like your images should add to the instructional objectives, your design should, that you don't need to use a fixed pixel slide base like Storyline or some of the other tools, although you can do that in Domino too. They have that option, but you can do that in fully responsive. And I like to think of it, hey, go out to those websites where you've been to a website and it's beautifully designed. It's really reinforcing the message with the layout, the pictures, everything in there. You get that same type of capabilities there with Domino in terms of how many things you have on a row. It's not just one thing and the layout and the design there. So, and I love the use of parallax effects that you put in there too.
Oh yeah, that's just something that we love doing in Domino. Okay, so I think Domino, it works with the kind of e-learning that we can put forth. The second point, I think really where we use Domino to the fullest is how do we ensure that an e-learning course is really doing what it's supposed to do? We can build good, engaging courses which really connect with the learner. But then there are so many courses, right, which have a good completion rate, which have good passing percentages, but still companies do face issues, do face learning problems on the floor. Because most of these courses would be judging whether you got the assessment right, whether you got the question right. They would give you a list of options and you have to just select the correct option and be done with it. So you get the correct answer, you're done with that. You go to the next one.
I think that's pretty critical. I mean, ultimately, our jobs as designers, instructional designers, learning and development, training, if you prefer, there is to create content that is an agent of change for the organization. So you can have behavioral change from those individuals. Part of it is eliminating that fatigue, as you said here, but creating that engagement, putting them into those real scenarios so they take away from that training and actually operationalize it in their day to day and working.
True. So on the floor, they have to pass, right? They don't have just to pass in the assessment in the course. So you have to really look at how people make decisions on the floor in the situation. And sometimes it could just be under pressure, right? So you have, say, something like an operation theater in a hospital, and there are great passing percentages for the people who are going to keep up with the hygiene and the keep up the operation theater. When you are in the situation where you have a lot of pressure, you have a lot of action activity going on, can you make the correct decisions under pressure, under that stress? Now, this is not a course. This is actual situation that you're handling. Are you okay with stereotypes and biases? How do you handle stereotypes? How do you handle bias? How do you handle pressure? I remember, there was a course for security personnel in a healthcare situation. Again, it's from healthcare, and they have these security protocols and all, right? And just a question that came up is, there's a security guard, he's doing his job. But when faced with certain stereotypes or when faced with people of a certain race or certain gender or certain, stereotype, right? Would they make the correct decision? Or if they are faced with somebody in a uniform, right, who they respect, would they buckle under pressure? Okay. And if we can help this person to understand what they did wrong, what they did right, and why did they do it right, or why did they do it wrong? So if there's a pattern in how they're thinking, how they're doing, how they're acting under pressure, or in that situation, then I think that's where e-learning courses can really help, just have deeper comprehension for the learners.
Yeah, and I was
So
thinking a lot of these, we typically get, and no matter what tool, you can do this, and it's kind of like, here's the question, there's the immediate feedback, there's the one scenario, there's immediate feedback, and on that. But as you put it, all those things together, combined, putting them in the situation, the pressure, especially like security. Let's face it, you get someone who has authority. Maybe they're the CEO or the president or something there.
absolutely.
Do you actually do what you're supposed to when they're giving you pressure, on that? And chances are a lot of us wouldn't. And you picked up on bias. A lot of times we don't understand our own bias or don't recognize it as easily. So bringing all those together to help reveal that as a pattern. Of course, there's a lot of different ways to do it. But again, if you have limited interactivity, you end up just showing it, doing a multiple choice question, showing it, doing a multiple choice question or something. Or, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. As in, there are so many examples, right? Or there are so many tales of soldiers asking maybe their generals for password, and if they can't give the password, they turn it back. Now that's good as a tale, but does it really happen on the floor, right?
Yeah.
Now that's a protocol, but is that really followed? And can we help the learners with this kind of insight into what they're doing? So this is something that we built into this course on some of those scenarios. I think that's the strategy that we followed. So can we recognize the pattern of their answers, and can we work on that pattern, and can we give them this pattern-based feedback?
Are we looking at the Rise version or the Domino version right now?
We'll look at both. So this is
Okay.
about these deployment managers or the project managers would need to work with so many different entities, right? So it could be the government of that particular country where this event is happening, or it could be venue security. It could be event managers. It could be the client themselves. That could be subcontractors. That could be other people you work with, right? And I think, yeah, in the RISE course, so we built it as a simple knowledge check, which gives a scenario to the learner, and different parties are asking for information, and how would the person react, right? In
Mhm.
Domino, we can go one step forward. So you have an event organizer who's asking the security team for details of all the crews, members, and their drug and alcohol tests. Now, this is something which is which falls in the special category under GDPR. So no way has this to be given out. But then it's an event organizer. Do you, as a project manager, give this information? You don't give this information. So probably you share as requested. That's risky. That's not the correct answer. You losing a lot in this case. You go next, and we are basically tracking all the questions. If they got it right, if they got it wrong. Your insurance broker is asking you for an incident report involving certain technician's name and all that. Now, in this case, it's the technician's name and medical details that have to be shared. But the person who's asking is your insurance broker. So do you give it? Do you not give it? Or do you do something, right? Share with modifications, just decline. So in this case, you have to share it because it's the insurance person, right? They need to know all these details. But then you say you go and decline, right? So that's not the correct answer. You go next, and a prospective client is asking you for some reference details. And it's a prospective client, right? It's upcoming business. So do you feel the pressure over here? And do you try to give the information or do you don't give it out? So you share with modifications and that's not sufficient because the correct answer over here is probably you should not divulge these details. They are a prospective client. You don't need to know this. When you go next and you're deploying some of the same contractors to a different event. So again, you should share with modification. In this case, you should remove the data which is not required and share what's required. Let's say I share as requested, which is the wrong answer. So in this case, what the activity does is it gives me a summary that, this says you've already challenging to judge the appropriate level of data. Basically, you got everything wrong. You should probably review what kind of data needs to be given out in this case. Or we could maybe look at another scenario where in the first case, we share as requested, which is wrong. In the second
Yeah.
case,
So it looks like you're going through it again. I'll let you kind of go through it, maybe get a little bit better this time.
yeah, let's say I mess up the first one,
Yep.
I do the second one correct, I do the third one, which is decline and redirect, I get it right. And the last one is I should share with modifications, share it, but yeah, with modifications. And then you made the overall right, but what you did was you overshared with the security event asked you for this. So basically, what we can do in such cases is it an external party where you feel the pressure, or is it a government authority where you feel the pressure, or are you just generally overcautious while you are asked to share this data? Do you recognize the correct places where you need to do as required, or can you make those decisions of doing the correct thing at the correct time? So this is a strategy that we follow quite a lot in this
Yeah.
particular
Back
course.
to that, just one thing's on that. Go back to the screen if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure.
One of the things I loved about this, think of the scenario. This is pretty common. I think you're going to show us a couple other examples. These questions and everything, they're all related and they're all a little bit different. In this case, the person you're dealing with, some of the exceptions to the law, but you kept everything front and center. So they're looking at it in context. It's remembering them in the context of the other items. And then I saw the feedback is different. It's not just based on you got this one right or wrong. You got individual feedback, but then you also have the summative feedback that, as I saw there, it's changing based on whatever combinations of things, as you said, helping them recognize their pattern.
Yeah, because basically what we are doing is we are tracking whatever they got right, whatever they got wrong. Now, there are just 4 questions over here. The actual course had a long list where we could really build all the patterns together. And with just more data set, we could work on all kinds of feedback. But basically, this is what it means, right? So let's probably go next. And this is called the PAUSE framework, where what is the purpose of the information that you need to share? What is the amount of information? What is the use? What is the security involved while sharing the data? And what is the expiry, right? Any data that is shared, personal data, could be non-personal data, has to have an expiry. So based on this, again, what we did was place the person in the situation and give them the scenario and then ask them to predict, right? Is the purpose in this case sufficient? Is the amount in this case sufficient from the scenario? Okay. So just a predictive analysis kind of thing. So purpose, they got it right. Amount, they didn't get it right. So this is a fail as it's failing on the amount, but I got it wrong. This I got it right. This I got wrong. This I got right. So expiry, I got it right. And based on this, I can actually again build a summative feedback on how I've done in this particular scenario. In this case, it's like 5 knowledge checks built into one screen, really speaking, and it's all on prediction.
Yeah, there was like three things I saw going on for me. There's one, this acronym pause. Obviously, they found this very valuable, a great way to remember the data. Just being able to present it this way reinforces the acronym that was designed there, the coloring, the layout, and everything from the fatigue that we talked about. Then you have, like the previous one, individual feedback on each individual one, and then your summative about it as a whole. I think that's the type of thing that really enforces that memory.
Absolutely. Going next, we are looking at different things, right? So the first was you're sharing by email, or you are at some event and then you are asked to share stuff. In this case, you have committed a breach, a data breach. You are sent across a mail to unintended recipients. So this is all about what is a breach, what counts as a breach. And in this case, we are asking them to identify what is a breach or what is not a breach, what is personal data, what is not a personal data. And then going next, we place the learner directly into a situation where they have committed a breach. They have just emailed the full crew deployment pack with passport copies, medical data, and all to the wrong client contact, right? At this stage, what do you do? So again, it's a standard 5-stage process for dealing with data breaches. And we are placing the person in a situation and then asking them, what would you do? Well, this is like a linear scenario, crunching scenario. So stage one, what do? You try to recall via Outlook. That's not the correct answer, right? Because you're just going to, uh, um, you're
Yeah,
just getting
I was gonna
critical
say,
time.
anybody who's
Does
tried
not
that,
always
see, that
work.
doesn't work very often.
Yeah, it does not always work, right? With external. So please disregard. You just saying, but please destroy. This is just drawing attention to the email and all. You're not deleting the data at all. So something like this, right? So the best way is just don't do anything and report that matter. First, document what has happened. So this is the correct answer. This is a legal requirement under GDPR. And then you have to tell your data protection officer. That's the best way to go about it. So what this activity is again doing is it's measuring what we are doing at every stage, right? And then it's giving a feedback of what we have done right, what we have done wrong. We got one right, all the rest, or one wrong, all the rest right. And then it's giving me a complete submitted feedback of what I did right, what I could have done better, and all that.
Yeah, so very similar to the other one, although
Very
I'm
similar,
sure
yeah,
people
but
have
the
seen this
situation
approach
changes.
of just question and question, but then also taking to that next level because all of these, like so much in our lives, it's just not a one question and then that doesn't affect the next thing or anything else. It's a combination of activities and bringing that combination back in like you did in those other exercises. But even if you use this approach or this design, that's the third or fourth different design of doing that same type of summative exercise in there.
Yeah, it's not possible is right. I think that's what the coming out as the underlying. Cool. So we can actually go to the next screen now because we have dealt with how to measure deeper comprehension. And basically, once you have a good comprehension, when you have reasonable steps, then you can get into the real reason what we are doing here, right? With
Oh, I
driving
should
behavior
mention
change.
too, since we said measure, we won't show it during here, but one of the things that with Domino too, in those practice exercises, not only can you track and provide the feedback as we show there, but you could actually automatically send that to your learning record store via XAPI too, because it's automatically tracking all that data. So yeah,
Available
let's
all
learn
the
a little bit
track.
more about driving behavior change, because that's even the next, in some ways, level of what you want to do here.
So as I was saying, first the comprehension, then you get into driving behavior change because now the person knows what they have been doing, why they have been doing what they have been doing, right? What is the best way? Do they see any pattern in their actions? And with this thought, they can start taking on their actions and to understand what are the consequences of their actions. I think this is something that really drives it. If the learner can know the consequence of their action, if they understand the consequences of their action, then that really feeds the feedback loop, right? Into they can then modify their actions and then go towards change. I think understanding consequences is something that we try to do in a lot of our courses, and we do a lot of gamification. So I think gamified courses, or if we can bring in elements of gamification, you can really help on this point. So we would like to talk about one particular course that we had done, and this was called Be a Headset Hero. This was for a fast food chain, and pretty much the people who are at the drive-in counter of a fast food chain. And we wanted them to understand the entire concept of great customer experience, how to give good customer experience, how to be mindful of the client, of their need, of their time, how to deal with angry customers, right? There can be a lot of things that happen at a drive-in counter. So how to always be mindful of the client, of their needs, and also how to upsell, right? Because that's a big thing that these drive-in counters need to do. Can you upsell? Can you just earn more? So this we did as a gamified course.
I think so many folks go into some of those jobs, they do an okay job and maybe hate the customers and don't walk away with it. I think this example you're going to show really changes the point of view and makes it fun and actually
Absolutely.
engaging.
Yeah. And yeah, it's a pressure, right? As in you have to think of
Mhm.
all this in a very short span of time. You can't forever be talking with the client. You have to have a great mindset while you're dealing with customers at your drive-in. So this was created in Storyline, and it started with, it was a teach and test kind of a piece where at the start you talk about, what are the best practices, how you ensure customer experience, how you do good upsells and all that. Something like this acronym called HEAT. So hear them out, right? Empathize, communicate, let you understand the guest situation, apologize, take action, and all that, right? So don't argue with the customer, and this be at your best and all that, right? So this is the teach piece. And then it starts with actual game. And the way it played out was, it was completely audio driven. So you click on the speaker icon and you hear a customer with their request. And at this point of time, you have to be at your best. You have to understand what the customer has said. And you have to also try and upsell, right? So in this case, the customer is asking for a hot dog. So can you do some upsell? How do you understand what they've asked for? Or do you ask some obvious questions? Can you make it a great customer experience, right? So we had this series of questions, and we were calling them orders, right? So there are about 5 orders or 5 cars in the drive-in, and for every customer, you have about 5 or 6 questions as part of the conversation. How do you do at the end of those 6 questions was how you measured. If you don't do well, you lose the order. The client just drives away. That's a consequence. Okay, so basically, this is how you're interacting, how you're upselling, and how you're responding to the client. So the guest gets upset after seeing a small price. So how do you deal with a irate customer and all that? And you get points, you got a lot of things. If you could complete the orders in a given time, you got something called a time champ award and all that. And right now we are actually not in the realm of Rise, right? Because this is not possible in Rise at all. Impossible to do something in Rise. But then we thought,
Yeah, I think if you
is this,
showed people this, they'd be like, oh, yeah, you can do storyline, but it's impossible to do it responsive.
we're not even thinking of Rise over here.
Yeah.
Right. So we thought of, is this something that we can do in Rise? So on, I think a couple of years back, did we? We
Mhm.
actually did a similar concept, a similar course in Domino completely. And I think we'll just go over there and see that course. Again, a similar concept with similar kind of questions and all that. And Padis, just want to check you can hear the voice.
With the
Service
audio.
game.
Oh, now we
Be
can.
ahead,
Yep.
set hero.
Good. Right?
Well, in this game, I'm your host and buddy. Join me in this exciting journey where you will discover and learn about our drive-through system, which is a vital part of our operation. Accuracy, courtesy, friendliness, and speed are essential skills in making your drive-through window successful.
One thing I
This
think people
game
are
is
so I
loaded
can do
with
this in Rise.
opportunities
Yes,
to
you
help
can
you
put a video
practice.
in,
The-
but this is just the intro, kind of laying
This
out that
is
and the
nothing.
acronym and the importance, right?
This is just setting the rules and setting the teach, which you could probably do it Rise in some way.
Let's get started.
Right? But now we get into the
As a
real.
drive-through person, you have 3 major responsibilities. These are order taking, bagging. While taking an order, you must take all orders.
So we start with this, the responsibilities and all that. This is, of course, completely responsive. It's Domino.
Yeah, I was thinking even more so, especially for this population. Not only there, you're on your
The
phone,
runner-
but you don't want to take them off into the back room where there's one computer, one at a time, to go ahead and take these
Seriously, yeah.
courses. Yeah.
So this would have great logic in just having it on a mobile phone when they don't have that kind of load. Just go through the module and be ready for the next order. That makes real sense, right?
In this level, you will confront some thieves
So
that
we're
counter
talking about
happy and satisfied.
the level, and it was done in two levels. The first one was a simple level, simpler questions. The second one was where they really had to put on their thinking hats and be on their best behavior.
Situation and turn it into a
Right.
positive one. Let's see how.
Okay, so these are the game rules, and incorrect responses will just take off one card. The client is unhappy, they just move off. You have a timer and all. So it's part
How
of
do
the
you
level.
respond? Select the speaker to hear the guest.
Right. So again, completely responsive. In the portrait mode, you would not, of course, see things like the image on the left, but you get all the elements of the
All the
game.
critical information's right there.
Absolutely. You
Yeah.
get everything that's needed for the game. You got a timer running. You have something called a wow board where we'll go through a few and then you'll see your points and your cars and everything over here. So you click on the speaker.
Hi. Can you get me 2 chili dogs, 1 chili cheeseburger, a small Pepsi, and a small fry, please?
Cool. And then you start making the decisions. So, okay, this is a good upselling point, right?
Good job. You did appropriate upselling to
And I
your
think
guest.
as you're moving through here, it's
How do
tracking
you
all the
respond?
different points
Select the
and
speak
the
guest.
steps a lot. I mean, if we think back to your previous example, this is another summative example presented in a different way, a very engaging way, a gaming type mechanism there and tracking all that information. In fact, I was thinking back to when I was talking to your team and they said when they developed in a domino, they actually didn't need to use any external JavaScript or anything like that,
True.
which even the original course they had to for like the timer and a couple other items because those are not even functionality and storylines. So
Yeah, we
this
got
is a
them
great
ready.
example of kind of that summative gaming experience and having it work on, again, great on any screen.
We got all those, something like a timer, right? It was built in over here. So we didn't have to
Yeah.
do anything else. Right. So
Well,
this was a
that-
great piece and we enjoyed working on this.
Yeah.
Want to go through a couple of more?
Yeah, let's go to take a look. I think you had another example talking about
Yeah.
having that balance between all of this great interactivity and design with the realities of our
Sure.
job here.
Operational costs, right? And we have, e-learning company, we have great team of IDs and visual designers, and there's a lot of creative team, a young creative team. We like to put our best, and IDs would want the best strategies and the best approaches to put forth for the clients. The visual designers would, want the best look and feel, the best looking course out there. And the delivery team, of course, would want all this to be done efficiently and within the cost, right? Just make it cost effective, just make the go to bucket quick for the client and all that. So there's a great emphasis on things that we can reuse, right? Like templates, for example, anything that saves time. So can we have something which you build once and use it again and again? So I think in Domino itself, there are a few things which can really help us. For example, something like, favorite components, right? Or favorite items, something like we can build and then use them across screens. Or in this case, we have used a lot of variables which we can track across the screens till the end. And that just makes a lot of sense in reusability, or the whole point of having learning objects in Rise, which we can reuse across courses. I think that is a great way in which we can use the same screen or the same learning object across various screens. So we built this, the juiced up screens, right? Where we have all those higher level scenarios working with the summative feedbacks and everything. And what we can do in Rise is we can use those, we can share those learn objects to create a completely new, say, a micro course where we can have all these, the scenario screens, say, all grouped together as a micro learning course for the learners.
And
to
what does it
take
look like
that-
when you start one of those?
We can change the theme, we can change everything. It's basically the same screen, but we can make it look different.
I think this is an important thing because I've heard the term reuse before in the Articulate world. And you're talking about, yes, there's templates and you can share with your team and favorites and multiples of little nuggets of design, which is even parts of pages. But there's also that concept of update once, it gets updated everywhere. So I know you had cases where there's graphics used in
Absolutely.
several pages. And I know when we were discussing, you found one and you updated and updated everywhere. And In this case, in fact, this has got a little branding on it, probably change some colors in there. Somebody talked about accessibility, a little contrast there. But yeah, those topics are
Oops.
just reused right there. You're showing that
Absolutely.
screen.
So this is now a completely different course, right? Which I can share separately, but it all comes from the main course where we have
Yeah, it could be a great refresher for those
Right.
folks who already knew it there, but you wanted those key concepts to be really driven home.
or you could, as in, you can have a button, a few screens, necessary screens for a particular situation, for a particular group of audiences. Just get that out and share that. And the whole maintenance thing just becomes so easy, right? Because your core screens are at one place. You maintain one screen, you make changes in one screen, it gets replicated everywhere.
Cascaded
So
everywhere.
that's something that is just nifty. And what we did with this course was, now we knew that there were two groups of audiences, right? One was people who were probably affected by data privacy things, like field technicians or people who were not in the decision maker role. And there was one group which was actually the decision maker role, which was the deployment coordinators, project managers, and all that. So what we could do was create two courses and have some screens targeted for one group, have some screens targeted for the other group. And pretty much some of the screens were kept completely same.
So your team actually, it's got a little target, a blue target next to those
Blue targets,
pages.
correct.
So you can have the single course that has unique elements for different audiences. In your case, just two audiences here, but you had, in some cases, just single pages or a topic. With each of those targets, it sounds like you have it targeting one of those two groups. Is that right?
Exactly right. So some of these screens remain the same for both the
That's
groups.
for everyone. Yeah.
That's for everyone. Then this is safe for one group. This is for another group. So we can have those targets specified. And the screens are completely different, right? Because one is where they just need to know. One is where they need to make those decisions. So we can keep the screens over here and create those two courses. And again, this is something, this is just two audiences. We can replicate this exact strategy for so many different audiences. So I think
Yeah, that
that's
would
the
be
way
a
to
huge time savings to really personalize it without having to have two courses. You go to update it and then have to remember to update both and publish both there. And how does that works on when you're playing it for the learner?
For the learner, yeah. So I go over here and I go to the field technician. Now we have seen the deployment coordinator. So let's go to the field technician view and start it. And of course, this is the same screen. You go over here. This
I notice
is the
there's less
same screen.
pages.
Yep. And then we come over here and this is a completely different screen because the one where you make the decisions, that's not needed. Then you come over here and this is the evil risk, right? Where we had those consequences and all. But here it's a simple knowledge check screen. That's what the other group would need to know. And
I think that gets
something
back
like
to some of
this.
those, some audiences really only need the information and general awareness. So
Right.
taking the easier route out that we've seen there, but the audiences that really need to have this, embrace it, live that, you have the perhaps more engaging, but also more immersive screens for them and information.
So yeah, these are the screens for the other party. And then something like the final assessment that will remain the same again. So this is how it plays out for those two audiences.
And I think you had in your case, they just pick because they're self-identifying. But I know you've had other cases too, where sometimes you launch separate courses, assign it differently, but it's really the same course. You just
You can
have
do
it
that.
published so it auto picks for them. Or sometimes I know there's been cases where you had to talk to an HRS system and it said, "Oh, Johnny's here," and then auto picked for him. So lots of different ways you can pick that audience.
So many ways you can have that. Exactly.
I think one of the last points that we had in our agenda there was your time and not leaving it behind. And, that's a key thing. I know some of the folks we talked to, they've built 1,000 courses in Articulate Rise or 500 courses in it. One of the great things, I know your team took advantage of it, but they really blew the door open. They really reimagined things in there. But for a few of the screens, they're like, hey, this is good. We just need to keep it. Domino actually has a service that we have built in, a conversion engine. And you kind of see some screenshots. This isn't smoke and mirrors or Harbinger in the back end, quickly typing and copying and pasting for you there. We actually take that Rise content, your published Rise content, feed it into our engine, do a mass convert on your 10 or 500 or 5,000 courses or 10,000, whatever that number is, and then turn it into fully editable content as you see over here. And of course, there might be on a off chance something that a little bit off there, and it takes advantage of the built-in review process. So right within the editing environment, you actually see those review notes, those sticky notes, which I know is a kind of a sore spot for Articulate users there because it's a separate publish, a separate tool. You don't see it in the context. You have to go back and forth, but you see any little notes there of anything off. I think in your case, if I remember correctly, there were 0 notes for your course when it was
Yeah.
right? Yeah. So it's just showing you in case it does come up, you can easily go ahead and see that. But then you have a fully editable version of your course, and you can do like the team there, just use some screens, completely rip them apart, change them up to do whatever you want. It's as if you copy it and paste it yourself, but didn't spend any time or work on it.
So the screens for the field technicians, this is what we used. We already had the RISE course there. So we just converted and then added those screens for the deployment coordinators.
Yeah, and of course, people always
Yeah.
ask, is there a cost to it? It is included as part of the service there. So yeah, trying to help remove that barrier so you can break free of those chains and move beyond RISE. Well, hey, Vikrant, this has been amazing. I mean, your team, as always, has really done a great job. That's why I love working with you. They have a great imagination, great instructional design skills. And I think it really showed, even with the RISE course, I mean, they did a fantastic job. Kudos to them on that. As you said, and when we started working together on this one, it really changes the game at the beginning when they don't have to tick off no, 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 and they're imagining what this could be, what they need to do. They can really focus on what are those learning objectives? How can I really create change within the organization? And then step up and to leverage all those great skills that they have in there. So
True. And Domino, we love working because it allows us to really stretch even our creativity and to really answer to what we are actually looking for.
well, thanks. I think with that, it looks like we don't have any other questions that we didn't answer along the way. So I just want to say thank you very much for Harbinger and Vikrant and your team there. It's been a real pleasure working with you and showing folks what's the art of possibility.
Thank you so much, Paul. This was great. This was a pleasure.
Okay. Have a great one. Take care, everyone.